Time now for Back Pages tonight here on Sky Sports News, bringing you a first look at the sports stories in the morning's newspapers. And joining us tonight are the Mirror's Andy Dunn and Heather Dewar from the Daily Mail. Evening to you both. Let's quickly look at some of the back pages, starting with the Times, where it says Kane, critics like Lineker 1-0 and Scotland crash out at the group stage yet again. Back of the Metro says Kane takes aim at Lineker, confusion over Murray's Wimbledon hopes. But we're going to start with the Times, and I guess only one place to start, Heather, and we will start with you. We feel for you here on Sky Sports News. A nation once again heartbroken. Just talk us through it from a Scottish perspective, because it was, I guess, ever so slightly inevitable, but heartbreaking nonetheless.
I should say, first of all, that we are used to it, so don't worry, I won't take offence. Look, yeah, absolutely devastating for Scotland, for the fans. The fans have been phenomenal. I mean, I would say they win in terms of the fans, certainly so far. Scotland looked to be in there at the end. You know, they had so many chances. In fact, if you were to say which team had more chances potentially in the dying stages, it would be Scotland, McTominay, Hanley with efforts. But you know, the whole game for me was it was kind of a strange one. I think if you look at the stats and you look at half-time, but I checked out the stats, and Scotland had 62% possession at that point. And yet there was just no pressing. I mean, there was composure on the ball, sure, but the quality of balls getting into the box just wasn't good enough. There was no goal threats at all. I think it was 4 shots on target for Scotland in comparison to 14 for Hungary. And that is just not good enough for a game at this level. And, you know, at the end of the day, you know, Hungary probably deserved to get it because they obviously wanted it, you know, and they were pressing when it needed. And we saw that nice goal being slotted in there with a lovely pick out. So, you know what, as I say, it's, again, Scotland do it. In fact, I had a conversation with someone earlier today saying, I bet that Hungary do it in the dying stages. People would say this is typical Scotland. And yeah, it kind of is. But I also think that there are so many elements to this particular game, but questions will be asked of Steve Clarke as to why he didn't bring Armstrong and Shankland on in particular earlier in the match.
Nostradamus Dewar. Let's go to the Telegraph then, Andy, because a picture here of Scott McTominay looking slightly dejected. He had a great qualifying campaign, but I guess they couldn't quite create enough in the final third. It was that little bit of quality that was missing ultimately.
Yes, they created very little in all 3 games. You know, it got off to the worst possible start. I think it's very hard when you get off to that start in a tournament. I was in Munich for the game. And in fact, one of my colleagues wrote a great intro where he said, like, you know, Scotland have been outstanding in this tournament. And then the football started. I think Heather referred to that with the fans. They've lit up this tournament, but the football hasn't been great. And I think when you get off to that type of start, 2 goals down in the first game, okay, against the host and a powerful nation such as Germany, I think that gets you psychologically, that has a real impact. Again, I agree with Heather on certainly Shankland today showed that he should have played a much bigger part in this tournament. But I just think that there was a lack of quality. And also, I was surprised, particularly in that opening game, that they weren't as intense as I thought they would be. You know, and even in tonight's game, yes, they had possession, but they didn't really have any, I don't know, a high level of vibrancy or intensity about them. I just thought they were actually quite lackluster in their performances, which surprised me. I thought they would have been all out, and if they go out, they'd go out all guns blazing. As it happens, they've gone out with a bit of a whimper. It's, you know, harsh to say, but that's what's happened.
Heather, where does this leave Steve Clarke?
Well, that's a difficult one to say. I mean, I think at the end of the day, he's taken Scotland to the previous Euros. He's taken Scotland to this Euros. So he's done a decent job. But then look at the run. I mean, one win in 11 heading into the finals. So I think one of the frustrations with Steve Clarke is that he's got a system and he likes to stick with it. He doesn't like to change what he knows. And it doesn't matter what anyone says to him. He will do exactly what he wants to do because he believes it's the right system. So he'll play at that. He won't make the changes. People were calling for Shankland to start, for instance, in that first match against Germany. He then didn't start against Switzerland either. So he didn't start today. So I think there are questions in terms of maybe that lack of manoeuvrability with Clarke. But he's been a good manager for Scotland. The the guys in the team, they like him, they really respect him as a manager. But I just wonder, when you look at actually where we are, Scotland, in terms of our win rate, whether maybe it is time that we should be asking questions now.
Yeah, I mean, we look at the back of the eye here. It says just quite simply gutting. In reaction to Scotland's defeat. Going back to Steve Clarke, though, Andy, does he not have some credit in the bank for leading Scotland to successive Euros and a pretty impressive qualifying campaign?
Yeah, he does have credit in the bank. He has quite considerable credit in the bank. But I'm of the opinion, and this just doesn't apply to Steve Clarke and Scotland, I'm of the opinion that managers, international managers, should be judged on their performance at tournaments, not the fact that they get them to tournaments, or how they perform in tournaments. And he's fallen below par here. I mean, it's as simple as that. And I always think that, it should be, international management, you shouldn't have a right to just stay in the job, for as long as really you want to. I think you should be judged on tournaments and then give someone else a crack. It sounds harsh to say, but I do think they look like a team that didn't perform up to the standard that they can perform. And that has to lie with the coach in the end. That has to rest with the coach. And, sometimes international level, a change is just good. They look stale. They become stale after the success of the qualifying campaign and the early success in that qualifying campaign. They just looked a bit stale here out in Germany.
Heather, a lot of Scotland fans will point to the possible penalty. There was a big appeal on Stuart Armstrong. What did you make of it?
I thought that was a stonewaller, actually, personally. I mean, we saw Orban's knee going straight into, or was it the left leg of Armstrong? I mean, for me, there was way too much contact. There was potentially a goal-scoring opportunity there as well. So I've no idea why that wasn't given. And again, I haven't heard the Steve Clarke press conference, but I would imagine he'll certainly be asked about it. Whether he wants to speak about it is a different matter. But yeah, a clear-cut penalty. I have no idea. And questions, they rightfully should be asked. And I think Scotland will feel very hard done by. That's not to say that they would have gone on to win the match or that they would have even, drawn. I don't know. Who knows what would have happened? But the fact is that it wasn't given. And I think most people watching that match would have said that that was a stonewaller.
Andy, you were nodding with Heather's assessment of that penalty. Sometimes in these tournaments, and I hear what you say about judging managers on their performances in tournaments, but you need that little slice of luck. Scotland didn't have any there.
Well, exactly. In essence, tonight was almost knockout football. It was knockout football to all intents and purposes. And we all know that in games like that, one moment can change a game, can be decisive. And I think that was a moment. I agree with Heather. I think it was a stonewall penalty. What I would say the reason why it wasn't given is that the impression I'm getting out here in Germany is that there's a higher threshold for VAR to intervene and change a referee's decision, or at least send him to the screen to look himself. I do think there's a higher threshold. They get it done quickly. So if it's not absolutely obvious the referee has made a big mistake, within seconds of VAR looking at it, they carry on. And I think that's why it wasn't given. But I agree, it was a penalty. And they probably would have gone on to win the game then. And, would have been playing in knockout stages. So I agree. Tournament football is littered with those sorts of moments. And, England know that only too well. So I do think he's unlucky in that sense. But yes, the broader picture over 3 games, Scotland haven't been good enough, haven't created enough chances, haven't played much good football. And that's why they're going home.
Yeah, I mean, one incident putting things in perspective was the injury, the incident, I guess we could call it, to Barnabas Varga, Heather, who was stretchered off. There were sheets draped over him. It was a really worrying moment, wasn't it? The Hungarian FA have told us that he's in hospital, he's stable and he's conscious, which is great news, and everyone, I'm sure, will kind of wish him well. A lot of stoppage time off the back of that, but it was one of those really worrying incidents that we see a little bit too often these days on a football pitch.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's not use the phrase head knock. Let's call it a clash of heads, because it's all too often used that. And these incidents are really serious. Yeah, it was horrible, wasn't it? Looking at those pictures when the sheets were brought out and there was that long period of time. I mean, thankfully we saw Ralston and Gunn getting up. But yeah, horrible situation for him, for the fans. It was good to see both sets of fans applauding him when he was finally stretchered off. But yeah, he was down there for an awful long period of time. And it did remind me of Christensen, actually, in the last Euros. I remember seeing that and being really taken back by that when I was in the fan zone in Glasgow. So yeah, really horrible, but fingers crossed he's doing all right.
Great stuff. Heather, Andy, for now, thank you. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll look at more of the back pages, including this in the Mirror double strop. Welcome back. You're watching Back Pages tonight. And welcome back to the Mirror's Andy Dunn and Heather Dewar from the Daily Mail. Let's go to your paper, Andy, starting with the headline Double Strop. Just to explain this one to us. Harry Kane not happy.
Yeah, I'll explain the headline first. He was playing darts at the media centre today, so whenever the player comes in, he plays someone at darts. There he is. He beat Henry Winter, actually, at darts. So next time Henry's on, you can mention that. Harry beat me, actually, in Russia 6 years ago. So he's obviously a bit of a dab hand at darts as well. But yes, he did have a strop. It was interesting, that he actually came into the press conference. I was quite intrigued today. I think he wanted to come in to make this point. And obviously the strop is in particular with Gary Lineker. And in particular with one comment that Gary Lineker made, one that's not, we can't broadcast here, we can't mention again. But he was particularly annoyed the fact that he thought the Lineker comment was probably a little bit gratuitous. And he pointed out that ex-players such as Lineker, such as Alan Shearer, for example, who's been critical of Harry Kane and England, he pointed out that they know what it's like, how difficult it is in tournaments. He pointed out that they themselves hadn't won any tournaments and said basically, he also made a point saying that it was more, and that's the thing why he was there, because he was there to say, listen, there's young players in the squad. Young players playing in their first or taking part or being in the squad for the first time in the tournament away from home. And they see all this stuff nowadays because obviously it's unavoidable. And his point was, listen, think of the effect that this criticism is having on them. Now, a lot of people reacted to this by saying, listen, they deserve criticism because the performance was clearly very poor against Denmark, although they didn't lose. But I think he's more referring to what he thinks and what the squad thinks is unfair, almost gratuitous criticism. And beneath that facade, I think he was quite angry today. Yeah,
interesting stuff. I mean, the back of the Metro says Kane takes aim at Lineker, Heather. So more on this story that Andy's talking about. I mean, I guess we've had criticism, haven't we, in the press of our coverage of our kind of sporting heroes on our national sides before, in that, we're brilliant when things are going well and we build them up. And then, of course, they have a couple of poor games and we're very quick to kind of knock them down and lambast them. But I think it particularly stings when it's coming from a player who's kind of been in Kane's shoes.
Absolutely. What a hullabaloo there's been over all of this. I mean, really, it's been like ever since the last match, seriously, I've heard nothing but comments about pundits, about players. It's been incredible. And at the end of the day, they did get a draw. But yeah, I mean, this is an interesting one because I can understand to a certain degree where Kane is coming from. I think that particular word, which is unbroadcastable, as Andy said, was maybe a little bit harsh, given that they didn't lose the game. But I think also it is the pundits' role to question, that's what they get paid for at the end of the day, to question players and, teams' performances, individuals, pretty much everything. And if they have this particular thought that England just weren't up to scratch, they weren't playing good enough. I think Dewar was actually one of the words that Lineker used in that particular podcast, then they have every right to say that. I mean, yes, they may not have won the Euros or the World Cup or whatever major tournament you want to speak of, but it's still their role as pundits to have an opinion. And it's really important that we have that opinion. And in their minds, they'll be doing it because they'll be seeing a group of players who play phenomenally well for their clubs. Why aren't they performing on the park as a team when it comes to the national side? They want a result. They don't want the side to let down the nation. There'll be lots of fans thinking that they should be playing much better. And I think also it was the manner of the performance that England put in. It's not just the fact that, there weren't individual performances but particularly up to scratch. It was the overall manner of performance. And actually, I had that coming through from a lot of fans through phone-ins, looking at social media. They just didn't feel like the oomph was there or the desire was there. And I think that's one of the major areas actually that some of these pundits are reflecting.
Yeah, and Andy, I guess you could flip it. It's a kind of compliment in a way, isn't it? Because the expectation now on England is high. You think back to Russia when Gareth Southgate kind of first took over, first tournament, expectation was about as low as it could have been. And because we've had success in a few tournaments, relatively speaking, that bar of expectation has been set higher. So we have a poor game like we did the other day. The criticism is going to follow.
Yeah, and those expectations have been raised not just by the England performances under Gareth Southgate, but also by the words of the players. You know, to a man, they've come into this tournament, as they went into the last tournament to Qatar in 2022, they came into it saying they believed they could win it. They really believed they could win it, to take that final step, having been in a Euro final, having been in a World Cup semi-final and then a quarter-final. They believe they can win. They set that bar, but they've got players. They've got, you know, the best player in La Liga, arguably, from last season. You know, they've got Phil Foden, the footballer of the year from the Premier League season. They've got Harry Kane, who's scored, you know, umpteen goals in the Bundesliga. That's why expectations are high. And what I would also say, in defence of the pundits, and after all, we're also, you know, ones I haven't won a tournament, but, you know, I criticised them very heavily. And what the pundits, they listen to it, and they listen to Harry Kane and Southgate themselves saying after the game, in Frankfurt last Thursday, themselves saying, listen, we didn't press hard enough, we didn't press high enough, we lacked a bit of, you know, physical intensity. So they're there to be criticised. I get that. And also, the players now, it's up to them to use that as motivation. I'm not talking siege mentality. We've seen that before at many a tournament with England. I've seen it many times, too many times. But if they use this as a bit of motivation when they go out against Slovenia on Tuesday night, then that's the way to respond. We all know that, not through press conferences, through going out and putting in a performance worthy of a team that were, in theory, tournament favourites.
Yeah, use the criticism to fire them up. Good plan. Talking about the fitness, though, you mentioned it, Andy, but Heather, the back of the Sun says, I'm 100%. That is Harry Kane referring to his fitness because, Andy, talked there about the intensity. You mentioned it earlier. Some of the criticism has been about the lack of pressing and questions asked whether Harry Kane is fit. He says he's 100%.
Yeah, well, if he's 100%, then I think you have to ask questions why he's not performing them. I mean, he may feel that he is 100%. And if he's saying he's 100%, he's 100%. He wouldn't say it otherwise. So I'd give him the benefit of the doubt and say, yeah, okay, you're 100%. So why are we not seeing your usual standard on the pitch? But I do think that we are picking holes in a lot of areas now. And actually, we mustn't forget that at the end of the day, all this discussion about individuals, whether it be Foden, whether it be about Kane or whoever, at the end of the day, you can only play with the team around you. Yes, they may play, you know, in some of the best teams in the world, but they play in teams which are also supported by players from other countries who are world-class players. So they've got that at their disposal. And if they're not working as that, and they don't have that regular outing as a team, as a national side, then they don't have the manager, for instance, who's with them day in, day out, as they have at their clubs, then are we really surprised? We've had this conversation in Scotland for many years. You know, you've got the likes of McGinn, you've got the likes of Andy Robertson, McTominay. How come Scotland are not performing as a world-class side when we've got brilliant players who play in the English top flight, for example? It's the same now with England. We're having exactly the same conversation. Maybe we just have to reel back a bit and just say, well, actually, it's not just about the individuals. And if Harry Kane is now saying he's 100% fit and we're still giving him grief for that, well, maybe we have to look a little bit elsewhere in the pack.
OK, I was just quickly going to ask you, Andy, a real quick one on this one, just to wrap up this England chat. We drew 0-0 with Scotland at the last Euros. I think we drew 0-0 with the USA as well. It was pretty lacklustre performance, that draw. So the kind of middle game of the group, it'll all be forgotten if we go and smash Slovenia.
Absolutely. And the one that England players trot out is that Portugal in 2016 drew all three group games. And if I remember rightly, I think that was Hungary, Austria and Iceland, and went on to win the tournament. And yes, that's it. Get through. The slate is wiped clean and roll on the last 16 game next weekend.
OK, we're going to move on and we're going to keep the Scottish theme going, Heather, you'll be pleased to know, because we're going to focus on Andy Murray now. Confusion over Murray's Wimbledon hopes. Andy Murray injured. Will he play in Wimbledon? Will he not play at Wimbledon? Conflicting statements. Talk us through this story.
Yeah, well, he had to have a cyst removed from his back. You might remember that he had to retire against Jordan Thompson earlier at Queen's, and yeah, from the first set, devastating. Although miraculously, still managed to pull back a game in that particular set. But so he had this cyst. He didn't know at the time what was wrong with him. So transpires it was a cyst, and it looks like the LTA put out a tweet saying that he was not going to be playing at Wimbledon, and now that's been deleted. And Leon Smith is his friend and former coach has come out and said that no decisions have been made. So we still don't know at the moment what will happen with him. But I keep saying on this, don't rule out Andy Murray because you never know what's going to happen with him. And I would still expect to see him in some capacity at Wimbledon. Like, even if he doesn't play, he's going to be there because he'll be commemorated and he'll be remembered, and he'll be, given the applause and the credits that he rightfully deserves. So let's not rule anything out as of yet.
No, he's a tough cookie. Hopefully he'll get there. If he doesn't, Andy, we know that Rafa Nadal's not going to be there. We know that Roger Federer's called time on his career. If there's no Andy Murray and Novak Djokovic, you're never quite sure what's happening with him either. To lose some of these big names is bad news for the championships, isn't it?
It's bad news, but it's Wimbledon's bigger than those players. Every sport is bigger than its biggest players in terms of that era. There'll be new players. There'll be Carlos Alcaraz to celebrate. There'll be Yannick Sinner. These guys are exciting young players, and a line has to be drawn eventually under that era. They're all getting old. Andy Murray's 37. So enjoy the young players and what they bring to the tournaments. And as Heather says, I just hope that Andy gets there. If it's not this year, then maybe postpone his retirement and come next year, because for what he's done and what he's done at Wimbledon, don't forget winning there and winning the Olympics there, he deserves one of those great centre court send-offs. Let's hope he gets one either this year or next.
Heather, Andy, thank you very much. It's been wonderful talking to you as always. So just a reminder that Scotland hasn't happened for them. Hopefully it will for Andy Murray. There was pretty good news for Scotty Scheffler tonight as well. He won a golf tournament with his baby, celebrating on the green with him. If you missed any of the show, there's another chance to see Back Pages tonight at hour. And the show is also available as a podcast. Just download Back Pages on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And join us again on Monday night when our guests will be ESPN's Mark Ogden and Sam Dean from The Telegraph.